Welcome to the Deep Dive. In today's complex global landscape where events move quickly and alliances seem to shift, getting clear information is, well, absolutely vital.
Indeed. And over the last couple of weeks in October 2025, the war in Ukraine has certainly entered a notable new phase.
We're seeing unprecedented military actions on one side and a near total diplomatic standstill on the other.
So our goal today is to really cut through that noise.
Exactly. We'll synthesize the facts from our multi-source analysis, look at the different perspectives driving the conflict, and pinpoint the critical developments you should be watching.
And before we dive in, we should mention this deep dive is brought to you by ProWave AI. They're pioneers in next-generation predictive analytics, turning global data into actionable intelligence, a valuable tool in today's world.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
And we've taken this incredibly complex situation, the military actions, sanctions, diplomatic shifts, and used Stylo News to distill it for us. Stylo News, of course, is the AI-powered news application synthesizing global intelligence instantly.
So where should we begin? The front lines seem like the logical starting point.
Agreed. Let's start there. We're seeing both tactical advancements and some significant strategic questions emerging.
Well, the most immediate headline, I think, is the shift in Western policy concerning Ukraine's long-range capabilities. That happened around October 23rd.
Yes, the U.S. administration lifted a key restriction, a very significant one.
They did. It allows Ukraine now to use certain Western-supplied missiles against targets deeper inside Russia.
We're talking about weapons like the British Storm Shadow cruise missile, right, aimed at strategic military and industrial sites in places like Bryansk and Mordovia.
Precisely. And reports indicate Ukraine put that capability to use quite promptly, striking Russian facilities shortly after the green light.
But there's a crucial counterpoint here.
Yes, the Tomahawk request.
Exactly. At the same time, the U.S. denied Ukraine's request for Tomahawk missiles. What was the reasoning given there?
The official line points to the complexities of training and operation. It's a more involved system.
So if you've been tracking this, you know that Tomahawk request was significant. Denying it while approving Storm Shadow use sends a very specific signal.
It does. It suggests Washington is trying to calibrate the pressure, increasing Ukraine's reach, but perhaps drawing a line at systems often associated with more complex deterrence scenarios.
A calculated risk, then? Increasing pressure without crossing a certain threshold, Moscow might see as an immediate strategic threat.
That seems to be the calculation. Now, while Ukraine was gaining this new capability, Russia itself was showing signs of, well, internal strain.
Tell us about that.
On October 19th, there was an explosion at the Avangard chemical factory in Bashkortostan. 3 deaths reported.
And Bashkortostan is deep inside Russia, correct?
Oh.
Hundreds of miles from the Ukrainian border.
That's right. And that factory is known to produce munitions for the war. So whether it was an accident or something else, it points to vulnerabilities in their military supply chain far from the front lines.
Interesting. And there are other internal security issues, too.
Yes. On October 22nd, the FSB announced the arrest of a man way out in the far eastern Amur region. The accusation was espionage for Ukraine.
The Amur region. That's practically on the other side of the country.
It really underscores that Moscow's security concerns aren't just confined to the border areas. The intelligence conflict seems to be happening across the entire federation.
Meanwhile, Ukraine achieved a notable tactical success around October 26th, the strike on the Belgorod Reservoir Dam. What was the direct military effect of that?
It was quite effective strategically, mainly because it targeted logistics in a localized way.
How so?
The flooding it caused disrupted Russian military supply lines in that area. Sources suggest it directly stalled offensives on the Vovchansk front.
Really? How much of an impact?
Reports indicated Russian assaults dropped significantly, from maybe 20 a day down to around 5. That single strike bought Ukraine some breathing room in that sector, reduced the immediate pressure.
It's quite a contrast, though, isn't it, tracking these strategic moves alongside the continued attacks on civilian areas?
It is jarring. The past 2 weeks saw repeated drone and missile strikes on non-military targets.
I recall reports of a kindergarten and railway facilities in Sumy on the 19th.
Yes, and a residential high-rise hit in Kherson on the 24th. And, very tragically, a drone strike in Kramatorsk, also on the 24th, that killed 2 journalists.
Awful.
That kind of targeting, whether indiscriminate or deliberate, creates immense local strain. We saw emergency power outages in Sumy as a result.
Beyond the physical damage, though.
Absolutely, it's the infrastructural and psychological toll. When journalists are killed just doing their jobs, it sends a chilling message. It disrupts essential services, hinders recovery, and just wears people down.
So these immediate frontline events, they need to be understood within the wider geopolitical frame. Let's pivot to that. What signals is Moscow sending with its longer-term strategic planning?
Well, a key date that emerged is 2036. Ukrainian intelligence reports, released around October 21st, suggest Russia's armament programs up to that year prioritize preparing for a potential large-scale conflict with NATO.
Preparation for war with NATO by 2036. That's not just internal planning, that's a direct signal.
It is. It fundamentally changes the defense calculus for countries bordering Russia, like Poland or Sweden. It signals a long-term view of strategic rivalry.
And this strategic posture was accompanied by some concerning weapons tests recently.
Yes, specifically the nuclear-powered cruise missile Burevestnik and, perhaps more alarmingly, the underwater nuclear drone Poseidon. Those tests were reported around October 30th.
For listeners who might not be familiar, why does testing something like Poseidon raise such global concern? What is it exactly?
Poseidon represents a kind of technological asymmetry. It's a nuclear-capable, very long-range underwater drone. Think of it like an autonomous nuclear torpedo.
So it bypasses traditional defenses.
Largely, yes. Many defenses focus on air and land surveillance. An underwater system like this complicates naval defense planning significantly. Burevestnik, the cruise missile, uses nuclear propulsion for potentially unlimited range.
These aren't just routine tests, then.
No, these seem designed to signal to the West that Russia is investing in what you might call existential deterrence capabilities, not just conventional ones.
And the Western response? We've seen more economic pressure, haven't we?
We have a coordinated sanctions effort. The U.S. targeted major Russian oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil.
And that aligned with EU and UK actions.
Yes, it fits with the EU's 19th sanctions package and new UK measures. They're all aimed squarely at Russia's energy sector.
The primary source of funding for the war effort.
Exactly. The goal is to constrict that revenue stream. Of course, the question always is, after 19 EU packages, how effective are they becoming at the margins? But the intent is clear.
And alongside sanctions, we're seeing reactions on NATO's borders.
Definitely. Sweden's defense minister, Paul Johnson, calling for Europe to adopt a war mode. That's a direct response to that 2036 planning horizon we mentioned.
And concrete incidents, too.
Yes. Poland reported intercepting a Russian reconnaissance aircraft over the Baltic Sea, and the UK granted new legal powers for its military to shoot down unidentified drones near bases.
These aren't small things. They show nations actively hardening their airspace and defenses against perceived threats.
They do. And while the West coordinates sanctions, we're also seeing a countermove, a sort of consolidation of what some are calling a Northern Alliance.
You mean North Korea's involvement?
Yes. North Korea's foreign minister, Cho Sun-hui, visited both Russia and Belarus around October 27th. It signals strengthening diplomatic and, likely, military ties, a clear counter-narrative to Western isolation efforts.
Okay, so we have this complex picture. Tactical shifts on the ground, long-term strategic threats, new sanctions, and shifting alliances. Where does this leave the decision makers? What paths forward are being discussed?
Well, that's where we see some stark divisions, particularly on the question of how long this conflict might last.
What are the different views there?
On one side, you have figures like Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Echoing President Zelensky's resolve, he stated Ukraine is prepared to fight for another 2, maybe 3 years. That assumes continued, robust Western support, of course.
But that optimism isn't universal.
Far from it. We've heard some very skeptical takes from influential Western commentators. Roger Boyes, an editor at the Times, predicted Ukraine could face potential defeat by spring, citing primarily financial constraints. The worry that aid might dry up.
And military perspectives.
Former UK Chief of Defense Staff, Lord David Richards, offered a blunt assessment. He suggested Ukraine simply cannot achieve outright victory without direct NATO military involvement, pointing to the sheer manpower differential with Russia.
That really highlights the core debate. Can external support alone sustain Ukraine, or is a different level of commitment needed?
Precisely. And in terms of diplomacy, things seem, well, frozen.
The planned Trump-Putin summit in Budapest was canceled.
Correct. President Trump cited a lack of progress toward meaningful negotiations as the reason. If the top leaders aren't even meeting, it casts doubt on near-term diplomatic breakthroughs.
Yet we hear about peace plan proposals.
Despite the stalemate, there is work happening behind the scenes. European and Ukrainian officials are reportedly drafting a 12-point peace plan.
What are the outlines of that plan?
The framework seems to include a ceasefire along current front lines, some form of comprehensive security guarantees for Ukraine, and then a phased approach to sanctions relief, tied to Russian compliance.
But how is Moscow responding to these kinds of initiatives?
Publicly, with dismissal. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov characterized statements from Kyiv as contradictory and unhelpful, essentially saying now is not the time for productive talks from their perspective.
Which brings us squarely to the debate on the best course of action now. What are the main options being pushed?
Broadly, we see two distinct approaches being advocated internationally. Option one is really about sustained pressure militarily and economically.
Who's advocating for that, and what would it entail?
Figures like U.S. Senator Jerry Moran are pushing for this. He urged providing more advanced weaponry, specifically those Tomahawks that were denied alongside much tougher sanctions.
So, doubling down on support and pressure.
Yes. And Finnish President Alexander Stubb argued for a similar posture. Negotiate only from a position of maximum strength. He drew a parallel to the strategy often discussed regarding ceasefires, like the ones sought between Israel and Hamas, build leverage first.
What's the primary risk with that approach?
Escalation is the obvious risk. Continuously increasing pressure could provoke a stronger reaction from Moscow. Plus, it depends entirely on sustained Western funding, which, as we've seen, is not guaranteed.
Okay, so that's option one. Sustained pressure. What's option two?
Option two focuses more on seeking a negotiated peace sooner rather than later, but locking it in with strong security guarantees.
Who is proposing this?
People like former U.S. Admiral James Stavridis have floated this idea. He advocates for a peace agreement that includes really comprehensive security guarantees for Ukraine, covering maritime, air, and land domains, potentially even involving a standing NATO presence to ensure stability.
And the risk there?
The risk is that negotiating while Ukraine might still have military momentum could be seen as rewarding Russian aggression. It might freeze the conflict on terms that allow Russia to regroup and solidify its gains. It's a fundamental disagreement. Pursue leverage or pursue stability now?
And complicating both options is friction within the Western alliance itself.
Absolutely. A key sticking point is the proposal to use frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's defense.
Why is that proving difficult?
The EU is struggling to reach consensus. Countries like Belgium have expressed strong reservations, citing potential financial risks and the legal precedent of seizing sovereign state assets. This internal disagreement over funding is critical, as it directly impacts the feasibility of either the pressure or negotiation path.
All right, let's step back and look at how all this information is landing. How are these complex narratives being received and discussed, say, on social media platforms like X?
Our sentiment analysis shows a landscape that is, perhaps unsurprisingly, deeply polarized.
How did you break that down?
We looked at two main clusters of sources. First, several major independent Ukrainian military analysis sites and news outlets. Within their audiences on X, the sentiment was overwhelmingly positive towards Ukraine, around 60 to 80% positive.
What themes dominated there?
Resilience, the importance of NATO support, celebrating tactical successes against Russia, that sort of thing.
And on the other side?
We analyzed several prominent Kremlin-affiliated state news agencies. They also attracted high positive sentiment, typically between 55 and 70%, but from their distinct sympathetic audiences.
And their framing?
Much more defensive, portraying the conflict as a necessary response to NATO expansion or aggression. It really shows audiences often consume news that confirms their existing viewpoints.
Is there any common ground visible in these discussions?
Interestingly, yes. Across these polarized groups and among international observers generally, there seems to be broad, albeit debated, agreement that sanctions are a necessary non-military tool for applying pressure.
So sanctions are a point of convergence, even if effectiveness is debated.
Exactly. And another interesting point, hashtags like #NATO frequently appear across different sides of the conversation. It indicates that the role and actions of global alliances remain a central focus for almost everyone discussing the conflict.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive looking ahead, what are the key developments listeners should keep an eye on in the near future?
I think the most critical variable heading into winter 2025-2026 is Ukraine's financial sustainability. Winter operations are demanding, and decisions on major Western aid packages in the coming months will be crucial. They'll determine if that longer fight Tusk mentioned is even viable.
So watch the funding decisions closely. What else?
Keep an eye on sanctions enforcement. We'll likely see continued efforts by the U.S., EU, and UK to monitor and tighten restrictions on Russian energy exports. The real-world impact of those recent sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil will be telling.
And finally,
NATO and EU decisions. Upcoming strategic meetings are expected to assess Russia's hybrid tactics and decide on future deterrence policies, and crucially, that long-term financial aid strategy, including the debate over frozen assets. These institutional decisions will really shape the conflict's direction into 2026.
A complex interplay of military reality, economic pressure, and political will. That concludes our detailed look at the key events of the past 2 weeks.
We've covered Ukraine's enhanced military reach, Russia's strategic signals, and the significant friction, both diplomatic and financial, within the international community.
And to reiterate how we put this together, this news brief was generated by Stylo News. It's an AI-powered application that synthesizes information from a wide range of sources, traditional news, military analysis, social media data like X, to provide these balanced reports.
We certainly encourage you to check it out. You can get AI-powered news on demand by subscribing to Stylo News. Just visit www.stylonews.com to learn more and start a trial.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. In a fast-moving world, staying clearly informed is more important than ever. We hope this analysis provided some clarity.
Please follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms to stay updated.
We look forward to synthesizing the world for you again soon.